Good morning. It's Monday morning, November 30th, 2020. I'm Pastor Mike Custer, the pastor at Bible Baptist Church, and I'm glad to be able to share some thoughts with you from God's Word today. In Matthew chapter 15, Jesus spoke of people who are blind leaders of the blind. And he stated this in Matthew chapter 15, verse 14. Let them alone, they be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. And he's referring to the Pharisees who were looked to as being spiritual leaders, but they didn't even know which way they were going. They were so confused about truth that Jesus said they're blind leaders of the blind. And there are a couple of things that we should consider relative to this principle. And one of them is, be careful who you follow. Because if somebody doesn't know where they're going themselves, they become a blind leader of the blind. And it's so important for one who is a leader to know which way he ought to go, he or she ought to go, and to be able to understand truth in the first place. And if this applies to spiritual leadership, it's especially true. I know some people have a certain favorite preacher or somebody that they follow, and sometimes that person who's supposed to be a spiritual leader doesn't really have spiritual discernment or understanding himself or herself, and that person is not called of God to lead others in spiritual things, and so can't do a good job of it and becomes a blind leader of the blind. Another application is be careful how you lead. Not only be careful who you follow, but be careful how you lead. Every one of us is in a place of leadership on some level, and it's important for us to be sure as we can be, with the Lord's help, that we are qualified in that leadership capacity, because somebody is looking to us for leadership, and we surely don't want to be blind leaders of the blind, because both will fall into the ditch. We need to be careful of understanding truth and being able to clearly communicate truth from God's Word so that we don't lead somebody spiritually in the wrong direction. And sometimes this happens in families. It's not even a matter of spiritual leadership necessarily, but the dad won't take his role of leadership of personal discipline and character and doing the right things, and so he leaves a poor example for his children to follow, and he certainly is not helping his spouse any at that point. But especially in the realm of the spiritual life, we should be very careful that we are consistent and understanding and knowledgeable of truth so that we can lead properly. It's such a blessing for our children to grow up and desire to follow the things of God. But you know what? If we're not consistent and if we don't lead carefully, we probably won't see that happen. We don't want to be blind leaders of the blind. Be informed, be knowledgeable, understand what the truth is, understand what the will of the Lord is, and be committed to it so that you will follow it faithfully, so that you can be the kind of example, the kind of leader that God would have you to be. This is so important. Somebody said everything rises and falls on leadership, and I think it's true, because somebody, in fact, most people are out there looking for someone to point out the way, to show them the way. And sadly, a lot of people are looking for a leader, and the one that they settle on doesn't really know which way to go in the first place. And so they can't help the other people who are following them, those others who are following after them in the next place. And so just be careful. You're in a place of leadership. Be equipped as you possibly can be. Be diligent about that. Be very serious about the fact that others will follow your example. God bless you today.